Again this morning. I'm glad we're all safe and sound, and even though we have some smoke and ashes, they aren't threatening our homes. Is everybody's house okay?
Yes.
Very good. We send up prayers for the firefighters who are keeping other people's homes safe. So the topic this morning is grace, gratitude, and grit. Grace, gratitude, and grit is a very important topic because it is a success formula for anything in life, particularly for prosperity. Grace, gratitude, and grit. Now when I think of that topic and I look at a vision that it reminds me of, I'm remembering the slave ship that was traveling from Africa to the United States in a huge storm. And the owner of that ship, who was responsible for capturing those slaves for sale, made a prayer that if he was saved, he was going to change his life. And he was not going to be a slave trader anymore. And so when the ship was spared and his life was safe, he wrote that song, Amazing Grace.
Amen. Thank you.
Yes. And there's been Steven Spielberg made a movie about it. It's called Amistad. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend it to you. So what is grace? You know, we sing about it, we say it before meals, and we don't really stop and ponder what it means. Well, the dictionary is very clear. Grace is unmerited divine assistance given to human beings for their regeneration and sanctification. It is a virtue coming from God. It is an approval. It is a favor. It is mercy, pardon, and privilege. It is unmerited. We don't have to do anything to deserve it, but we do have to accept it. We have to accept it. When we get into self-judgment and criticism, self-doubt, then we are not in the mood or in the realm of accepting the grace that is given. Now, in the science of mind, if we believe that we have within us the same energy and the same spirit of the divine, as Jesus taught us, the kingdom of heaven is within you, then we understand that it is part of our job as human beings to be gracious to ourselves and to other people. So it's great to accept the grace of God, but it is our job to pay it forward. It is our job to give it to other people and to ourselves. When we get into self-judgment and self-criticism, then we're not very gracious. Because nobody does a bigger hatchet job on us but ourselves. Isn't that true? Yes. And the more we do it, the more negative we become, and the more we experience other people doing it to us too. And then we point the finger at them. There came a day when St. Peter ran into the exalted office to God and said, Your Excellency, there are some gangbangers at the gate. They have tattoos and baggy pants and greasy hair. What should I do? And God said, Now, St. Peter, we don't practice judgment here. Go back and let them in. So St. Peter went away, and in a few minutes he came back and he said, They're gone. And God said, The gangbangers? He said, No, the pearly gates. So when we practice judgment, that which we have can just disappear. So we say grace for what we want at mealtime before the meal. And we need to continue saying grace for anything, giving thanks for anything that we want before we receive it. And certainly for the things we're thankful for that we already have. The act of gratitude is the art of giving thanks. And you know, sometimes we're very thankful at Thanksgiving. We may even talk about it for a little bit at dinner time. After we spent 2 days making a meal, you might spend a few minutes talking about what you're grateful for. But as a culture, we're not necessarily grateful on an ongoing basis. So I remember a year when I was in ministerial school, I went to a workshop in South Central LA given by a co-worker of mine, an African-American science of mind practitioner. She asked us to go home and come back the next day with a list of 100 blessings. So, you know, the first 30 or 40 was not too hard, you know, giving thanks for my education and for my family and for my car and for my house and things like that. And then, you know, it was a little harder as I got into the second 50, but I was very proud of myself. I got to 100 and I brought them back to the workshop. And then I listened to an African-American woman with a shining face say things like, I'm grateful for soap. I'm grateful for clean sheets. I'm grateful for toothpaste. Now, none of those things had made my list. And I felt very ashamed because those very simple things are things that millions of people on the planet do not have. Millions of people on the planet do not have clean drinking water. And yet, do we stop to give thanks when we let some of it go down the drain instead of drinking it or using it? One time I was in Indian territory, in Hopi land, and they had no running water. All the water had to be brought from the stream every day. The water for drinking, the water for bathing, the water for cooking, the water for cleaning dishes. And then you have a different appreciation for water when you don't have it readily available. And I just heard on the radio this morning coming over here that we are entering into the 4th worst drought that we know in the last 100-year history of California, and that we all need to conserve water. And I wish we had more announcements like that, because I know that we would do it if we were really aware of it.
Yeah.
So let us give thanks for our drinking water and the running water that we have, and be very careful with that precious resource. There are some other gratitude practices. You know, we like to give thanks for the different aspects of nature, but have you ever stopped and just given thanks for one part of nature? An orange, a leaf, a bird? Right now, close your eyes and just focus on one of your favorite aspects of nature for a few seconds. Just give thanks. Let your heart open and give thanks for whatever part of nature speaks to you right now. Because there are so many we could think of. Let's just choose one. And giving thanks for that, just call out some of the aspects of nature you're grateful for.
Hummingbirds.
Flowers, hummingbirds,
Bamboo.
bamboo, kittens,
Ants.
ants. Yes, so many things that we could think of. But we don't stop and just focus on one. That's a wonderful gratitude practice. Because what Fred read to you this morning is, when you stay in the attitude of gratitude on a continuing basis, miracles take place. It opens the channel for prosperity. Lack of forgiveness and judgment closes the channel. Gratitude opens the channel. So it's incumbent upon us to be grateful in many different ways. It's also important to practice gratitude for individuals that inspire us. And when I was thinking about, I have so many mentors in my life to be grateful for, but this morning as I was driving here, I was thinking about how grateful I am for Dr. Holmes. Dr. Ernest Holmes, who is the author of The Science of Mind, that wonderful teaching that teaches all the principles that are the same in the great religions of the world at the mystical level. You know, at the mystical level, we all believe the same things. It's only when we get to the fundamental level that we have differences. And so I was just giving gratitude to Ernie, as a lot of people called him, and he was happy to be called. Not Dr. Holmes, not Dr. Ernest, but just Ernie. And I was remembering a time when I was applying to the School of Ministry, and I went for my interview, which was fine, and I didn't know or realize I was also going to have to take a test. Because when you become a Science of Mind minister, you have to spend 4 years becoming a Science of Mind practitioner. And I was already that, a licensed practitioner. So I didn't know you had to have an entrance exam to the School of Ministry. So they ushered me into the library and set me down at a table with this test. And I'm going, oh, brother, it's been 3 years since I did my practitioner training. And there was a picture of Ernest on the wall. And I looked at Ernest and I said, okay, Ernest, you're going to have to help me out here. So whenever I came to a question that I wasn't totally sure of, I would just meditate for a moment and ask Ernest for the answer. And of course, you know, he gave it to me. So I'm just very grateful for Ernest, for Dr. Holmes. Dr. Holmes was a very loving individual who spoke kindly about everyone, who loved everyone. He particularly liked children and animals. He also loved flowers. He grew roses. And he grew many, many, many roses. He had a huge rose garden that he personally took care of. So he was a great spiritual leader. Someone who never could afford to go to college, but who received over 70 honorary doctorates to different universities throughout the world because of his many books.
Wow.
Dr. Holmes. It's also important for us to give gratitude for being Americans. Because regardless of whatever is wrong with our country, we still have the most prosperous country on the face of the planet. And we have great reason to be grateful for the freedoms that we enjoy. And we want to remember that according to the Declaration of Independence, we were all given the title of sovereign citizens. Sovereign means the highest, the most important, royalty. And I have a prosperity class going right now in my hometown of Ojai. And somebody said, you know, whenever I'm not feeling so good, I just have to remember I am royal. I'm a royal, sovereign person, where we have the opportunity to determine our own destination. I became extremely grateful when I saw a movie the other evening about the people of Afghanistan. It was a movie about terrible things that have happened in world history and how people have made the best of them. And one incident touched me the most. In Afghanistan, when the Taliban was in control, music was outlawed and musicians were killed. And so in the town of Kabul, which is the capital of Afghanistan, the word went out that the Taliban was coming to kill musicians. And there was a lute maker who took his prized lute, wrapped it in plastic, and put it in the ground, covered over with earth, and fled to the mountains, where he lived in exile for 30 years. And when Afghanistan was freed from the Taliban, he went back to Kabul, to his house, which was in complete rubble, had a lovely home which was completely destroyed, went into the garden and dug up his lute. And this videographer was there and filmed this. And as he dug it out and take the plastic out of the ground, he said, you know, Sufis believe and give thanks for the earth, for everything. And I'm giving thanks to the dirt for protecting my lute. And he opened it up and hugged it. He hugged the lute. And there was another story about that period of time where the musicians were not allowed to sing or play or participate in any kind of music. And one musician just said he didn't think he could bear life without music in his life. So what he did is he went out and he bought a lot of songbirds. And he took the songbirds into his house and he more and more until his house was filled with the music of the birds singing. So it's just such a simple pleasure as music, we don't have to think twice about it. So it's another thing that we have to be grateful for.
Amen.
And gratitude is something we express when we donate a portion of our good, when we give money to the place that gives us spiritual nourishment. So when you donate, you're donating to the source. You're donating to the divine for all that you have. You're not giving to a location or an organization or to a minister, but you are giving directly to the divine because you are signaling, I am so grateful for all that I have. I'm returning a portion of it. And of course, 10% is the magic number that most of us are so terrified of. But 10 is the unity number 1 plus the infinity number 0. So that number indicates the realization that God is in us and we are in God, and all is well because our abundance is flowing. Now there was a piece of research that was done recently in congregations all across the United States about how people felt about tithing. And it was very interesting. People who tithed gave money because they knew that it ensured their prosperity. People who didn't tithe said that people who did tithe gave money because they had it. Very different point of view. So whether you're giving to announce your willingness to receive more, or whether you're afraid to give it because you think that's all you got, tells us something about our consciousness, because it is the consciousness of gratitude that opens the channel for prosperity to move through our lives. And sometimes we don't think of everything that is prosperity. We think it has to be money only. And truly, this is a cash flow formula for success: grace, gratitude, and grit. But there are so many other things to be grateful for that come unannounced when we stop and pay attention. Last week I was doing the dishes and there was somebody at my front door, which is rather odd because most people call before they come over. And I had no idea who this was. So I went, "Who is it?" And I went to the door and it was the son of my next door neighbor. And he said, "You know, your husband said that he would take some professional pictures of me because he's a musician. And I just thought I would do some gardening work for you. So I thought I'd start over here in the side yard and just pick up those weeds." And I said, "But you haven't seen this side yard over here, which has, I would say, at least 100 times more weeds. Would you be willing to do this?" And he said, "Sure." And in about 2 hours, he had pulled a mess of weeds I had been kind of working on for a long, long time that I had let go because I was too busy, and I had never let it go to look like that. It was really bad. So we stop and give thanks. There was my garden completely clean of weeds, and I didn't do anything. I didn't lift a finger.
Amen.
So that's a little miracle. That's a little miracle, and sometimes we don't stop and give thanks for the miracles that we have. You know, so many Americans want more than they have and spend more than they make. And we're not grateful for what we already have. And we are so blessed to have so much. So the final ingredient in this formula, the success formula, this prosperity cash flow formula, grace, gratitude, and grit, is grit. What is grit? What do you think it is? Call it out. What's grit? What?
Chutzpah.
Chutzpah, yes, a good Hebrew word, chutzpah. What else is it? Tenacity. Resiliency. Anybody else?
Resistance.
What? Perseverance. So for sure, it is all those things. You know, when you look at the dictionary, it tells you it's the hard little pieces of sand in the mixture we call concrete. You know, it's this thing that sticks it together. It's the little particles that are hard, like a rock. And so we have to have grit if we want to create something. We have to have the perseverance, the resiliency, the ability to stick with it. And I'll tell you an interesting story. I heard a talk given by an educator on the TED circuit. So know that some of you know the TEDx Foundation is a group that looks for leading edge breakthroughs in all fields, in technology, science, the arts, everything. And they take speakers who talk about those breakthroughs on the leading edge, and they film them, they video them, and then they broadcast them all over the world so that people can hear those talks about things that are breakthrough inventions and things. So I heard a TED talk by an educator from New York who was a woman who had worked on Wall Street, and she got tired of doing that, so she decided to become a school teacher. So she was teaching in the inner city, and she taught for a couple of years, and what she found out was that the students who were really successful, who were capable of getting the right grades and going to college, it really wasn't about their IQ, it wasn't about their talent, it wasn't about their EQ, their emotional quotient, but it was about grit. And what she said, and what I call grit, is the perspiration quotient. That is if you want to really work hard. And what she said is that after a few years, realizing that some kids had it and some kids didn't, she wanted to do a PhD dissertation and find out, how do you get grit? So she set about doing studies. She went to college. She was working on her dissertation. She did research to try to find out what it would take to help kids get grit and what is grit in terms of human experience. And what she found out was they didn't know. They didn't know what it took to have kids get the grit that it took to be truly successful. But you know that there are so many stories about successful people who became successful only because of grit. You know, we look at the stars we have in Hollywood as, the blessed people, and for every star you will see a story where they went through enormous hardships to get where they were. Many of them penniless, living off of ketchup and crackers in New York City while they were in off-Broadway plays. I'm reminded of Sidney Poitier, who's one of our most celebrated actors, came to this country from the Bahamas, barely speaking English. They spoke a kind of pidgin Creole in his very small island, Bahamian island, came to Florida and experienced such racial prejudices, he decided to go to the north. So he went to New York City, not realizing that it gets cold there. And he didn't even have a winter coat. So he almost froze to death. He had absolutely nothing. Got a job washing dishes because he was not educated, could not barely speak English. And he learned to speak English listening to the radio while washing dishes. And he would read cast-off magazines he would find in the trash. And when he read a word that he couldn't understand, he would listen for it on the radio in context until he could figure out what it meant. He didn't even own a dictionary. Now, the miracle is the only standard for American pronunciation of English is broadcast speech. So he studied the only form of the American dialect, which is as good as the Queen's English. Amazing. And of course, he's an Oscar award-winning actor. So it is about the grit. Now, how do we get the grit? In spiritual work, it's very easy to get the grit. Or let us say we know what it takes to get the grit. I don't know how easy it is, but it is if you get into the practice, it's not difficult. And that is you have to meditate or pray or contemplate spirituality or spiritual literature every day. You have to be in the attitude of gratitude for everything in your life. You have to keep your thought process positive and open to the good you could receive instead of complaining about what you don't have. That is a surefire way of obtaining spiritual grit, which is not about hard work. It's just about spiritual discipline, but yet most of us don't do it. I know your practitioners are doing it perhaps a lot more regularly than everybody else, but it really isn't that hard to do if you say, okay, I'm going to read spiritual literature for at least 15 minutes every day. I'm going to keep my mind open for the good. I'm going to be gracious to other people. One of the most gracious people I have ever known is Steven Spielberg's mother. She owns a restaurant in Beverly Hills. And if you go to her restaurant, and even if you're a first-time visitor, she will greet you as if she knows you. And she's going to ask you, oh, I am so glad to see you. How's it going? And she will talk to you as if you were a long-lost friend. And I'm wondering how open most of us are to do that. I know I certainly can learn to do better. So it is this wonderful formula: grace, gratitude, and grit, that opens the channel for us to experience the good that is available to us. So I am just so grateful to have the opportunity to remind myself of that formula as I'm sharing it with you. So let's go within now and know that there is an infinite presence, a great creative intelligence. That great creative intelligence in the sky is not the big dummy. It's the great intelligence, the divine intelligence. It is within me, it is within you, it is within all living things on planet Earth, and all things that were made by human beings, for it is the stuff out of which life is made. And so, giving thanks for that, I am speaking a healing word for everyone in this congregation, knowing that everyone is blessed. I'm knowing that their hearts are opening to receive their good. I'm knowing that they are willing to use their spiritual grit to accept the many blessings that awaits their experience and their life. And so we simply release anything that is unlike the grace of God. We let go of self-judgment, and we let go of self-criticism, and we let go of criticizing other people. For as we bless, things increase. And so, in this wonderful attitude of gratitude, I release these words into the universal flow, knowing that all is happening according to the divine plan, which is a plan of freedom. And so it is, and so I let it be. And together we say,
And so it is. Amen.